young people, young entrepreneurship. We went in the 30s, people thinking it's a good place to start a business, up into the 60s. However, we've got one area, if you've seen the presentation, that we've really been dragging on, and that is people of particularly people of African American or Black in our community feel that while the rest of the community move forward, they have not had that opportunity. In fact, over 80% of the people that were polled thought there was racism in our community. 50% of the white people thought there was racism in our community. And I think it's good that we identify it. Because the worst thing you can do is not identify issues and address issues, because it always starts with awareness and going on. So we've really been digging into this and worked really hard at it, because we know what a long ways we have to go. But if we put the same effort into this as we've done other things like downtown Pensacola, young opportunities for people, the fact that 15,000 children have gotten a awareness, moms on brain development. You know, we give every mom not only a brain bag, but a video that was developed by the University of Chicago. We now have peer-reviewed research from the University of Chicago to say that those moms were turning the dial. And if you're aware of this, we offer something called Pensacola Basics. That's a partnership with the Harvard Medical School, where every mom, when she leaves the hospital, hopefully, we hope every hospital just does it, but we haven't gotten them there yet, but hopefully we will. Right now, it's a willingness to sign up. So we have over 1,300 moms that every 2 weeks get a text, get 2 texts every week telling them what they should be doing to develop their child's brain. So my long-term goal is to get every hospital just to make that part of the discharge plan, that the moms get signed up. It's $2 a year, by the way, and right now it's free. So what a great deal. So we're excited about that. We do a lot of things in entrepreneurship, and of course we have CivicCon. So this is Vincent, this is my Randolph Brown. And let me explain how we came across Vincent. I'm on the board of Tribe Health in Bethesda, which is a healthcare system in Cincinnati, Ohio. And even before George Floyd, they were ahead of this curve through their CEO, Mark Clement, wanting to make a difference in his community. So they've really gotten very aggressive with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So being on their board, I saw what they were doing. So I asked Mardia Shans, who at the time was their chief diversity officer, now she's in Seattle, who would you recommend if I could call one person in the country to bring into Pensacola to work with, who would you recommend? And she said, Vincent Randolph Brown, and that's who I brought him. For over 3 decades, he's been in this. He's first with a talent optimization program company that he sold to Korn Ferry, Shannon Korn Ferry. Anyway, in 2012 or so, but then he's now started another company with Fred Keaton here and some other people that have really looked at how do they help organizations grab this diversity, equity, inclusion. Now, we brought him in to work with the Studer family and companies. Even though we only have 178 employees, I think we do pretty well with inclusion, with sex. I think we do pretty well with age. And I think for our hourly employees, we do pretty well with race. We have not done a good job in management. I'll tell you, out of our 33 people that are supervisors, we're just way lacking in having people that are more diverse. And it's not because we haven't tried. I'm the guy that goes around the country talking about it, and I couldn't figure it out. So I sort of figured, if you can't figure it out, maybe you should ask for some help. So we actually hired Vince's company to come here and work with us. And we were hoping that what would happen in Pensacola is what happened in other cities. When you bring somebody in, other people join. So for example, you go to other cities, the chambers jump in. And I so had our chamber here, thank you very much, Todd. The school district jumps in. The city and county, and nice, Dr. Smith, nice to have you here. The county and the city jumped in. I don't know if there's any county or city, any county commissioners here? Any city council members? Well, they jumped in. They jumped in and grabbed it where we can all do it together. And of course, we have the school board. Patty, any other school board members here? Patty, nice to have you here. So what we wanted to do is offer this to the community. Now, it doesn't mean you have to jump in, you don't. But we're just using Vincent here, and we hope others will join in, and hopefully we can share what we learn. It's been a long time. He's written a best-selling book on intrinsic inclusion, and I don't know if you know this, but he's sort of a Cincinnati Reds fan. So I've never seen him without a Cincinnati Reds hat, almost, even on that. And he's a huge baseball fan. Huge baseball fan. In fact, the reason we got him to do this tonight? It's because he's gonna be here tomorrow night for the Wahoo. So seeing he's a big baseball fan, I'm gonna introduce him like you would a baseball player, if you don't mind, or a basketball player. So when I do this is a nice round of applause for Vincent Randolph Brown.
Oh man. Okay. So I finally made the show. Actually, this has been a dream of mine. Little different, but a dream of mine to be on a baseball field. And I want to start with that as a story, because what I want to do is first thank Quint and thank Pensacola for this incredible honor. I am honored and I am humble. I am so appreciative. I also want to thank Will Donahue for the amazing tour today, to really get an opportunity to see your city and to experience it. And I also want to just say a dear friend of mine who you all happen to have as a treasure, Dr. Cedric Alexander, who is truly a premier leader in this work. I'm so glad to see him. And he was kind enough to say, hey brother, you from Ohio and you're gonna be perspiring, so he brought me some handkerchiefs. Okay, so thank you for taking care of me. And I wanna thank everybody else. A little different than what Quint said, because Quint said, I'm gonna share with you what others are doing. I'm actually gonna challenge you to do some things others haven't done. And I'm gonna challenge Pensacola around some new thoughts and ideas that Dr. Janet Reed and I have regarding this concept we call intrinsic inclusion. The reason I say I'm going to challenge you is because this is new research. This is not something that we have done. In fact, this is only the second city that I'm actually presenting at, and Dr. Reed and I have plans to walk all around this country to talk about this important subject and to see if we can get others to join us on this journey of intrinsic inclusion. Now, let me ask you, Pensacola, are you willing to join me on this journey? Yes. All right, great. So first thing you gotta do is stand up. Yeah, I know it's hot, but I'm hot too, and I got a jacket on. I want you to silently take a look of all the people that you see here without saying a word. In 7 seconds, we make 11 impressions. In 7 seconds, we think we know all about you. In 7 seconds, we start to make things up. In 7 seconds, we think we figured you out. The brain is working so fast, so hard. So in 7 seconds, I've already figured it out. Here's my challenge to you, to go from 7 seconds to 7 minutes. To go from 7-second impressions to 7-minute realities of getting to know the people versus what you think you can see. And the reason I want you to do that and to consider that is because our brains are biased. If you are human, you are biased. Now, if you're not human, it doesn't apply. Okay? But if you're human, you're biased. So have a seat. Thank you for joining me. It's not the first time. Next slide, please. Next slide. So I just talked about this 7 seconds and what happens in 7 seconds. So Dr. Janet Reed and I, we've been doing this work for a long time. People say, how long have you been doing the work? I'll say, a long time. Because I actually started out with a really big afro. Yeah, people were laughing now like, whoa, that's a long time, right? And in fact, my sons oftentimes will laugh at me, and I look back at them and I say, remember, DNA is very powerful, okay? So with that, in 7 seconds, we're thinking we figured everybody out. So here's what we need to do. Before we make decisions about people, especially those we don't know or that are in particular different than us, pause. Pause. Why am I making that decision? Why is it that everybody who comes in here looks just like me? Why is it that everybody who just went for this job came from the same school? Why is it that some people are getting great performance reviews all the time and other people are not? Why is it? Why? The power of the pause. Because the brain is an efficient machine. What it does oftentimes, it makes quick decisions. Sometimes they're good decisions. Sometimes with humans, not so good. Next slide. In 7 seconds, you think you figured us out. I think I figured you out. And I start associating you with other people that I think I've seen before, what I think I know. And so all of a sudden, I'm already thinking I know what it means because my brain is working like this quick machine. Folks, if you're human, you're biased. So what we have to do is first acknowledge that reality. Because we are biased does not make us bad people. It makes us human. But here's the choice I think we have. Whether or not we control our biases or whether they control us. That's our choice. And that's why the power of the pause is so very important. So I am on a new mission along with Janet to really get this message out. Because after doing this work for some 35 years, working with major corporations all around the globe, we, quote, retire, and guess what? It looks just the same as it did 35 years ago in a lot of places. We really haven't progressed. And by the way, I don't know if it's happening here in Pensacola, but the world's a mess outside. There's stress, there's trauma, there's a lot of things that are going on. And oh, by the way, those are all things that help to add to stress, which can also lead to what? More bias. So unless we take the time to pause before we make decisions about each other, we might be making the wrong decision. Next slide. So you're human, you see somebody. In fact, I'm from Cincinnati, consider that the Cincinnati Bengal Tiger. I see somebody and my brain quickly goes, are you in or are you out? Friend or foe? Why do you think we wear uniforms, have colors? So I can look a long way and tell, are you a friend or a foe? So I'm gonna give you an example. I am in Europe, in Greece. I've been there for 2 weeks. Janet and I have been training people from around the world. 2 weeks. All of a sudden, I see someone with a University of Michigan t-shirt on. What do you think I did? What did I do, folks? Ran up and talked to him. In fact, I ran. I literally ran at him. Now, when I think about it, here's this big black guy running at this small little gentleman who was from Greece. And I'm only wondering, what the heck was he thinking about, right? So I run over there because I'm looking to see, are you in? And I go up and I start talking to him. Hi, how you doing? I've been here. And he starts speaking in Greek. So what did I say? You tricked me. No, he didn't trick me. My mind tricked me. Because in 7 seconds, we make 11 impressions. In 7 seconds, we think we already know. In 7 seconds, we think we figured things out. So that's why we have to make sure we are pausing. Next slide. The way the brain works, you see somebody, there's interpretations that take place, well, observations, interpretations, and then that forms your mindset. And then based on your mindset, there's nothing you can do with that. That's going to happen. That's going to happen way quicker than 7 seconds, quite frankly. But what can you do? You can control your behavior. Can't change the mindset, but you can change the behavior. But how do we get there? Next click. Pause. So you're going to hear me continue to drive this whole idea about the power of the pause, that we need to do more of that. Next. So when Charlottesville took place, the event where the crosses, where the people were what felt like they might have been part of the Klan, that event that took place in Charlottesville. At that time, my wife and I were traveling back and forth from Virginia, and I saw some folks get off of that plane. It was right after the event. So right after the event, they get off the plane. I look at them, 7 seconds, they were in biker gear. What did my magnificent brain say? They must have been there. Since they must have been there, they must be this, they must be that, they must be this, right? I'm human. So in the middle of the flight, one of the things you never want to hear is, we have engine problem, or there's a medical emergency. Well, in this case, it was a medical emergency. A gentleman in front of us, in front of my seat, I was thinking he had died. I mean, literally, he was slumped down. He was a black man. And all of a sudden, there was this rush of people that were surrounding him to bring him back to life. The plane turns around. They literally saved his life. And guess what? 2 of them were who? They were the biker ladies. They were the biker ladies. And no, they hadn't been in Charlottesville. And oh, by the way, they just happened to be surgical nurses. And I watched them save a life. 7 seconds, folks. We make 11 impressions. In 7 seconds, we think we figured people out. And oftentimes, we don't have a clue. At the end of that, though, I stopped, I paused, and I said, "Thank you. Can I know your name?" And she said, "Michelle." Then she went away from being the biker lady to a person. Folks, we got to start seeing each other as people, not entities. We need to get behind the curtain and realize that we're all valuable. And that's what the power of the pause is. Next slide. So I'm doing some work right now with Dr. Reed at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. I think one of the things we need to do in this country is actually to have a real dialogue on race. But I don't think we know how to have that dialogue yet. But I think we do. So the debate was, for those who recall, Cincinnati, the moment you crossed the Ohio River, you were technically free. And I use technically loosely because of the Fugitive Slave Act. You could be brought back at any time. So you really weren't free. But here's what I want you to think about. I actually think there were 2 groups that were enslaved. I think it was certainly the slaves, people of African descent who weren't slaves, but they were of African descent. I think they were certainly in that position. But I also think those who held them captive were also enslaved. Folks, When are we going to have the conversations we need to have about what's happened in our country and move forward? But we have to do it with the power of the pause and understanding. Next. So here's the good news. So I'm giving you all of this, but I want to also shift to some good news, because there is this. So what Dr. Reed and I thought we would do is, in addition to study some of the issues around biases so we could really understand how they work, which we did a lot of that, we also talked about, well, what about those folks who, even though they are biased, are also behaving, again the word, behaving in an inclusive fashion? Why don't we look at their behaviors, their characteristics, and see what it is that they do? And can we teach that? Can we have that happen on larger scales? Can we start having conversations in corporations, in communities, in every place that people gather? The good news is that we can all be inclusive. The good news and the reality is that we all used to be. When was that? When we were children. A lot of the characteristics of children. So for example, I hear people say, oh my goodness, children don't see race. That's not true. Children see race very early. All kinds of studies show you do see race because you're trying to figure out who's taking care of you. Here's what children don't do. They don't judge you because of what they see. They judge you based on what you do. So if somebody says, I don't see race, what are you really saying? If you tell me right now you don't see race, what I'll tell you is you don't see some important parts of me. You don't know my lived experiences, you don't know my worldview, and are all black folks the same? No. But do we have some shared experiences? Yes. And that's all of us. But unless we get behind the curtain, take the time to get to know people, have the power of the pause, then we don't get the benefit of that. So these are the kinds of things that we need to think about. But we can all be inclusive. Next slide. So I want to share with you what I'm going to ask you to consider doing on a go-forward basis. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more and bring it to life through a little bit of action and interaction. So the first thing is, one way, and we call these true bias disruptors. How did we get to that? Well, Janet is a bioinorganic chemist. So a lot of the research that was done is work that she started to lead. And so she was on this board at the time of the Ohio State University. And in her humor, she went up to her neurosurgeon and said, wouldn't it be nice if you could put a little lever in somebody's brain and they would no longer be biased? And Dr. Ali Razai said, no, not really, we can't do that. But one day, who knows? So that was this whole idea, was that, so what does nature say? What does nurture say? Well, one of the ways that we can begin to change our biases is to form a significant emotional relationship with someone different than ourselves. Think about that. Have a relationship with somebody very different than you. Have that interaction, have that ability to start having conversation and dialogue, have that openness, and guess what? We can start reducing our biases. Just by starting to practice. And oh, by the way, what Dr. Ali Razai did say is if we do that time and time and time again and we start practicing that, we might be able to create new neural pathways that create a new route for us to behave in a different way. Now, he is one of the premier individuals who actually help those who were strokes move their limbs. So I think he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. So imagine this. I start having relationships with people different than me, and then I start to applying that, and then all of a sudden, that becomes a new potential route. Your biases never go away, but you may have an alternative route. So think about that. The second one is shared trust. When you can create trust with people different than yourself, and they can trust you, and you can start having conversations, guess what happens? You start to reduce the impact of bias. You create shared respect, understanding. It changes our biology. It changes how we feel. And then we can start to apply that to a lot of different folks. Next, respectful empathy, not sympathy. I like to say it this way. It's not only do I recognize that I'm walking in your shoes, but my feet start to hurt. And I respect your journey. That's what respectful empathy feels like. If you can create relationships with people who are different than yourself and practice respectful empathy, then we can start to reduce the impact of biases. Next. No, if you can go back for it, one more. One more, please. Yep. Yep. The last one is connected understanding. Oh, we got to pause. Stay on that one, Fred, and just move it on. Get me caught up there. Connected understanding. When you have the opportunity to see how other people think, experience the world, how they relate to others, that creates an opportunity to reduce biases. So the charge and challenge that I'm asking you to consider is actually this. Think about having a partner that you practice this with. Somebody you didn't know. Think about that as a work colleague and practice some of these behaviors. Next, please. It's real important to know this. It's difficult to be inclusive because nature, nurture, and biology are in play. I know we realize this, but if we're in a fight or flight mode, do you realize that your heart rate goes up? Perspiration, when you start being around people you're not comfortable with, it changes you. It changes your biology. It changes how you think and how you process information. And our culture, how we are acculturated, really affects us. So nature, nurture, and biology become very, very, very important. Next slide. So I want to start to do this. I want to see if we can change our biology just a little bit. Can everybody take out their cell phone, please? No, I'm not going to ask you to take a picture of me. But if you can consider taking out your cell phone. And what I want you to do right now, it's been a tough year. I want you to right now think about someone who has done something very significant in your life in the last year. Everybody got somebody you really appreciate. I want you to see that person in your mind's eye right now. Do you see him? Do you see him? On your cell phone right now, I want you to send them a text message. And I want you to send them a message to say how much you appreciate them for whatever it is. Right now. Now I want you to think about how you're feeling. Do you feel any different? Yes or no? Your body, your thoughts, your feelings, any different? That's what happens So we have to have the power of the pause. We have to stop and pause. We have to thank people for what makes a difference. Yes, next slide. Next. Next. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want to make sure that we all have a common definition of what we're talking about, because oftentimes I find that people say it differently. And we are diverse by many different dimensions. So if you take a look at that diversity wheel, you'll see a lot of different dimensions. But the ones that typically get us stuck are the ones you can what? You think you can see. Those are the ones that real quickly bias can jump in. So when I think I can see it, I can judge it. When I think I can judge it, then I've already made a decision about it. Those are the things that we have to keep in mind. So simply said, next, we like to think of it this way. Everyone in here is diverse. Diversity is a noun. Everyone is diverse. Inclusion, next slide, is a verb. It requires an intentional action. And equity is a principle or a value. And I like to think of it this way. Equity is about making sure everybody has a level playing field, but also has the best talent in order to play. I want to give you one of the best equity decisions or scenarios I can recall. There was a lady named Miss Annabelle. I'm a military brat, Navy brat. Anybody in here? Anybody know anybody from the Navy here? Love the Navy. So let me just tell you about this. The only job I could get in Cincinnati was to go and play, actually to work with the Cincinnati Reds, sell peanuts. Peanuts here. Hey, ice cold lemonade. Miss Annabelle had a system that was equitable. Because what happened back in those days is nobody had an employment agreement. Every day you applied for the new job. And what would happen is young boys, for the most part at that time, would line up, the first ones on the left, and then as you got there, you lined up. At the end of the day, Miss Annabelle would come up and she would say, show me what you got today. And if you said, I got peanuts, I'm ready to do it, she was ready to hire you. She didn't care what you look like, what you sound like. It was all about your ability to perform. That's what equity. Everybody has the opportunity to perform, to do their most, to do their best. And that's one of the things that she was able to do that I remember to this day. Next. Next slide. One more. So I want to do this as we get ready to come to a close, because I'm asking everybody to consider building these kinds of relationships. I just want to see if we have any connections. Next, please. Next. I told you about that afro. I told you it was a wow. Next slide. So, real quickly, Fred, if you could just click through some of these real quick for me. If you see me, you might not know some of these factors. Next. That someone in my family is Italian. I don't know if anybody else has that. Next. That someone in my family is a Gen Xer. Next. That someone in my family is black. You might have figured that one out, right? Okay. Just keep going, Fred. Here's my point. Unless we are willing to get behind the curtain and be able to see each other's shared experiences, we can't make this a more inclusive environment and world. Next slide. You can click through. Thank you. One more. Next. So I just want to share with you a little bit about my story and why this is so important to me. Growing up, I knew what it was like to be out all the time. Being a military brat, you're in and out. When people say where you're from, I say, I don't know, 2 years and out. Oftentimes I found myself in the in group, and oftentimes I found myself in the out group. What does it feel like, folks, to be in the out group? It's not a good feeling. So what we tried to do is to make sure we can take time to get to know each other and get to know each other beyond what we think we can see. And that's the power of the pause. Next. Next slide. So if you take a look at this right here, you see some people, you get ready to get on an elevator, right? And all the folks look like this. Probably you're going to be a bit nervous. 7 seconds, you think you figured it out. But you don't know necessarily who they are. That's, folks, why we have to pause and make sure that we aren't making rash judgments. Next. 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 So I said earlier, this whole idea about how our brain works, and that we have the old school brain that's fight or flight, we have the new school brain that's really where our logic is. We have to pause so we can get the information there. Next. We're all biased, it's human. You can flip through the next one. Yep. Stop right there. What does that say, folks?
Implicit bias. Implicit bias.
Okay, next one. I'm sorry, Fred. Let's go to the next. I can't see the screen there. Can you go to the next one, please? And the next? Okay, right there. You probably can't see it that far away. Can anybody see that? What does that say? Yeah, okay, go ahead. Do it again. Click it again. Click.
Oh, wow.
See how quickly the brain thinks it knows? It does association and it makes a quick decision. In 7 seconds, that's what happens. So we have to make sure we are pausing to see the whole picture. Next slide. That's too far away for you all to actually read, so I'm going to go to the next one. What does that say?
Good times are here.
The good times are here. Right? Next slide. Is that what it said? This is how quickly the brain works and makes decisions. So folks, we have to think about this. So now, as I get ready to come to a close, I want to bring to life those principles. If you can go, click through. Here are some of the principles of people who are naturally inclusive. First and foremost, they seek to build relationships with people different than themselves. Are you naturally inclusive? Next slide. They have a natural curiosity to build relationships with others different than themselves. Are you naturally inclusive? Next slide. They don't stereotype people, and they have less fear in making new relationships. They're willing to stretch, grow. Are you naturally inclusive? Next slide. Here's one of the keys. Because they're human, they make mistakes, they learn from those mistakes, and guess what they do? They forgive, and they teach others. Are you naturally inclusive? And the last is they are absolutely champions for other people. They are absolutely and relentlessly championed for people different than themselves. These were the 5 characteristics that we observed in those individuals who were naturally inclusive. And I want to ask you this. Do you think Pensacola would be an even more fantastic community if more of us were behaving that way? And that's our challenge, and that's our choice. We do not have to have biases run us. Once we understand them, we are in charge. Next, please. Next. Connected understanding. What does that look like, Vince? I'm going to ask the question here real quickly. How many people here are very analytical? If you are analytical and you like data and facts and numbers, just stand up real quickly. Analytical folks. All right, data's and facts, data's and facts. All right, look around. Some people standing, some not, right? All right, next. How many people here are really planned and processes? You like plans and processes. You like procedures. Look at that. All right, next. How many people here are like big picture, innovative, creative, like big ideas? Look at that. Next. How many folks here are really relationship oriented? That you really sense people, feel people, and you want to have a connection? So let me tell you what the data shows. Thank you. You know what the data shows? Most of us have 2 preferences. This is based on the Herman Brain Dominance Instrument. Most of us have 2 preferences. If I understand how you prefer to think, and you understand how I prefer to think, connected understanding, do you think we'll communicate better? Because the world doesn't communicate like Vince Brown. There's different ways. So connected understanding is a bias disruptor. We all can speak all 4 languages. That's the good news. But we have to realize that everybody doesn't see things exactly the way we do. Does that make sense, folks? We got to pause. How do you prefer to communicate? Let me tell you how I prefer to communicate. How do you see the world? We get that connected understanding. What happens to the bias goes down. Next. How many folks have been in a relationship where there was a lot of trust? That feels pretty good, doesn't it? When the trust is shared and it's reciprocal. Do you think you can have a more difficult conversation with someone you can trust or somebody you can't? Folks, we don't know each other and we don't trust each other. And that's one of the reasons why we're not having conversations. We don't know each other and we're not building trust with each other. But if we start to do that, guess what? We can disrupt our biases. Next. Respectful empathy, not sympathy. Who programmed you to see the world as you see it? Who was it? Family, friends, institutions, right? And they just put the software in there, right? Stand this far away, sit this way, do this, don't do that, because the whole idea around culture is to make sure you're safe. So what your family is doing is saying, be around these kind of people, don't do this. Just. Do you think we have different programs, folks? Yes or no? Yes. Absolutely. So unless I get to know your story and how your programming was, and you get to know my story, then is when we can have a conversation about other things. But until that time, I'm operating on one software, you're operating on another, and we don't hear each other. Next slide. The one I think is most powerful is this idea about a significant emotional relationship with someone different than yourself. Now I want to ask you another question. When you sent that message that I asked you to text to someone who has done something for you, how many of you sent messages to people that were different than you? Okay. I'm looking around and I'd say, and I'm not doing the numbers, I'm not that blue numbers person, but I'm thinking it's probably around 15% or so. Because often, guess when we know what beauty looks like? Guess when we know what brilliance looks like? It looks like me every time I wake up in the morning. I'm looking in the mirror and I go, hey, that's the most smart person on the planet. Folks, we do things and we do them unconsciously. So I'll give you an example. I have 3 sons. Let's say it's time to hire one of my sons. It's time to go to hire. I have 3 young black men that are sons. A young black man walks into a job interview. What might my brain say unconsciously? Keep it real. They remind me of who? Who? And do I love my sons? Do my sons need a job? Do I want them to get the job? So all of a sudden they start sounding like their answers were better. They seem like they're more prepared. They seem like that they would really be a good fit. And next thing you know, I can rule out everybody else and rule them right in. Do you think that is what's happening in a lot of hiring practices today? Well, why is it? I always like this when people say, we would hire them if we could find them. They're not hiding. People of color, and particularly black folks, are in more organizations and associations you can shake a stick at. You may not know where they are, but they are not hiding. But it's comfortable to hire people we know. It's comfortable to be with people that we've had relationships before. It's comfortable. Folks, the enemy of inclusion is comfort. And unless we are unwilling to be uncomfortable, we're never going to have the conversations that we need to have. Unless we're willing to be honest and say, yes, Vince Brown is human and biased. Yes, Vince Brown has a worldview and perspective as a black man growing up in the 50s and 60s, blah, dot, dot. And then the other person can say what theirs is. Now let's talk. But until we are willing to do that and have empathy for each other, it's not going to be able to be heard. We are talking at each other, not to each other. And sometimes we're not even talking at all. Next slide. 7 seconds, folks. If we can move from 7-second conversations, 7-second put people in boxes, to 7 minutes, let me hear your story, let me feel your story, let me become understanding of your circumstances. My question is, how do we do that? We can do it in organizations, we can do it in the places that we worship, we can start having those kinds of conversations. In fact, thinking of a best practice, one of the things that we're looking at doing is creating an opportunity to take hundreds and thousands of people through a common experience at the same time. So we can start learning together, growing together, and bringing these kind of conversations together to create more intrinsically inclusive people. Last thing I want to close on is sports. Since we're here, I think that sports has often led the way in our society in terms of the power of diversity. And if you think about sports, you've got to value the diverse players. They're not all the same, right? You've got to make sure players feel equitable, right? You've got to make sure every player's, every role is included because it's important, right? You got to make sure that people respect each other, right? You've got to make sure that the team understands what it is that the game plan is, right? You've got to make sure there's absolute trust amongst the players. And the best teams have relationships with each other that take place off the field. Folks, we see the models. They're already there. So the question is, the one thing that I think is different is this. On the team, we know what the goal is, and it's to win. Folks, we can win together, or we can lose separated. Will you join me in becoming more intrinsically inclusive each and every day? Will you consider that? Yes. Great. Thank you very much.
Is there another microphone over there? You might be sharing a mic.
Oh, that's fine.
All right. Thank you so much. We knew you were going to be great. Quint has been talking about you for at least a year, right? Just so excited to have you, and you did not disappoint. So there was a ton of discussion tonight about how we can check our own biases and how we can change our biases. I think I'm confident that everybody who's here today is willing to do that, or they never would have come to an event like this. How do we reach people who are unlikely to come to an event like this, whether that's they don't think they're biased or they think they have a reason to be biased? How do we get them in the room and change their bias?
I think I don't want to say it's simple, but I think it's called role modeling the way. I think we have to begin to have the kind of conversations that if I go up to you and say, hey, I'm thinking you're a little bit biased. I got this class for you. Show up at 3 o'clock. It'll feel like an intervention. No, what I think we have to do is we have to start saying, let me tell you about Vince Brown. At one point in time, I didn't think I had any biases, but let me tell you the ones I'm figuring out. Let me tell you how they're getting in the way, and I want you to consider joining with me. But I think it's about role modeling the way in our communities and importantly in our workplaces. But another fact that we found on the research that to me was really kind of interesting, that actually goes against the way we are leading a lot of people today in corporations. The intrinsic motivation model says that for somebody to change from the inside out intrinsically, there are 3 things that have to be in place. First, you have to feel as if you relate to the subject. So the question is, are we relating to each other? And is this an issue? The second is, you have to feel competent in your ability to do something new. Are we creating competency for those folks? And the third, and this is the big one, autonomy. We do not like to be told what to do. So we have to create environments for people to want to do this versus be told. And that's what's currently happening, and we've got to figure out together how we get people to see the real reason why to do this.
So you had talked earlier about the best place to start is from a place of trust. So how do we build that trust before you can work on changing bias if it's not there to start?
So you saw the picture that I had of my family. Recently at one healthcare organization, and this happened about 2 weeks ago, we had everyone on the team create that collage, their lived experiences. We had everyone on that team take 7 minutes to share to the team, here's my experiences, here's what's been going on with me, here's how I see the world. And guess what happened? All of a sudden, people started to see connections. All of a sudden, I start to understand why you see things that way. You could see the trust start to grow. But what happened is we started to be vulnerable and started to share. So creating a safe space to have conversations and dialogue and being able to share yourself and your own story are great places to start.
Will and Fred.
Yeah.
Will and Fred.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say thank you. Thank you, Fred. So Fred reminded me of the Will and Fred story that happened today. Over lunch. Perfect example. Thank you, Fred. So we're sitting there, never met Will before. Will, you know, I know everybody knows you, but just stand up for a second, Will. Just stay standing, okay? So we're sitting over lunch, right? And I'm not going to say they look like they're Fred says, I'm from Mississippi. OMG. All of a sudden, they start talking about Mississippi and what it was like and what the nuances were. And honestly, I mean, they just left everybody else out. They had made a connection. If they had only looked at each other, they'd have walked past each other. But the moment they shared and started the commonalities, it was amazing. And I learned some new language from folks in Mississippi that I had never heard before. I'm not even going to try to, I think it's called two twins, that you always say two and twins together as if twins aren't two, but I don't know what that means. But thank you guys. But that's my point, folks. And that happened in less than 3 or 4 minutes, literally. In less than 3 or 4 minutes, the key word hit, they opened up, and there was a connection. And I wouldn't be surprised if they stay connected in some way, shape, or form. That's what happens when we're willing to share our stories. But here's the flip side, though, folks. We also have to value equally the different experiences. Yes, it is about connections, and yes, it is about the differences, and that's where the magic is.
We have a reader who sent in this question before she heard your discussion tonight. So she's trying to do many of the things that you talk about, both in her workplace and then in the community. She's a Black woman trying to have conversations with a very diverse audience. And she's concerned that she is not able to do that without offending people that she's having in the conversation. Any advice for her?
Well, first I would say, thank you for doing that. I mean, that would be the first thing I would say is thank you for doing that. It's not easy work. Remember, one of the characteristics that we talked about is this less unjustified fear of making mistakes. That's part of it. But the other thing is rather than maybe go and try to get a lot of people first, maybe build a coalition with 2 or 3 other folks who are a little different than her, and then start the message. Because one of the things that I want to also be clear is that especially when we start talking about racial reconciliation and things of this nature, and this is my own personal perspective, honestly, we need our white brothers and sisters to take the lead. We need them to become involved and active and champions. We need that to happen. So for her, I would say don't try to carry the burden alone. Find some colleagues, find some cohorts, find some other people that you can partner with and have them share the load. And I think that might make a difference. But thank you for continuing to do it.
Related to that, and this is a personal question for me, we often talk in my field, and I'm the editor at the News Journal, about how we need to be in communities that we, full disclosure, have not been in enough. in the past, and we recognize that and we know that. But there is a fear, we're going to say the wrong thing, we're going to use the wrong language, we're going to make things worse. So similar, but these are people who really think they're going to put their foot in it. What is your advice for them?
You are going to put your foot in it. And you are going to make mistakes. You're human. But the way we've seen it work best, so know that's going to potentially happen, but the way we've seen it work best is when you say, let me tell you, I'm not good at this. I'm vulnerable, I'm trying to learn. I will likely say some things that might not be. I want you to understand what I'm trying to do. If I make a mistake, help me understand what mistake I made. Help me understand why I should see it differently. But oftentimes, if you come with humility and with a desire to really want to learn and share, most people, in my opinion, will fill your heart and they'll give you some grace. But what happens is a lot of times we don't even want to try. So it's easier to sit by the sidelines and say, oh, well, all the things that they may do. You are going to make a mistake. Have you never made a mistake in life? We have to get past that and be willing to take the risk, but to do it with good intention. I hope that helps.
That's perfect. Are we taking that sound bite and sending it out to our journalists? A lot of questions that we got from our readers were about the workplace, and it was interesting to me. Many of them were from the employee versus the manager, and largely we want to have this conversation. Our employers are not letting us have this conversation. So what can that person who doesn't have any, they don't supervise, they have to fight against someone else, how can they start a program in their workplace? Is it merely tips that you can give on how to approach your employer, or are there things they can do even if their employer pushes back?
Well, certainly every organization is going to be different. Oftentimes when people talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I have found it's approached as a problem. It's a problem to fix, it's a problem to solve, it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem. If you can flip it sometimes and say, let me share what the benefits of us having this conversation are. Let me tell you how it will increase our workforce. Let me tell you how I think it will help us do other things. Let me tell you how I think it will help us. So perhaps changing the narrative a little bit, and here's what the value is. Now, you're still going to work on the problems, but sometimes getting in, people need to see what is in it for them and what's in it for the organization. And so that might be one way to do it. Again, the second thing is to create relationships with others who are like-minded, because oftentimes a larger voice will have the employer pay more attention.
We're going to stick to the workplace for a little bit here for some of these questions. So another question from a reader. How can I express the importance of a cultural shift towards equity and justice when white leadership thinks hiring more minorities is the solution? They stop there. I'm simply going to hire more people of color.
If you want a recipe for failure, just start hiring. That's absolutely a recipe for failure. It feels like a quick fix. It's absolutely the wrong thing. Because you have to think, when a person comes to an organization, yes, they're coming for a job, but they're coming for a career. They're coming for an experience. So as you're thinking about that, you need to think about it from the whole experience. From the time the individual comes to they have opportunities to be promoted, to grow, to develop, etc. The best recruitment program is checking out how people are doing currently. So yes, the shortcut is hiring. but what you'll often find is a revolving door. So you have to think about it more systemically than just one action at a time. You have to look at the whole system and make sure that you're offering opportunities. And people, I hear people say, oh, people won't come. People are looking for opportunities where they can fully engage and fully be involved. They are looking for that. But you have to be able to share that that's a reality for them.
I'm going to ask you to expand on that just a little bit. Earlier tonight, you said that finding, diverse candidates is difficult. They're out there. So I'm going to flip this question a little bit to talk about tips on growing your diverse candidate. And everybody's diverse. I'm going to stop myself from using that word now, thanks to you. But tips on growing. I guess I don't know another way to say diverse talent.
So people not in the majority?
Yes, that's where I'm going. Yep.
Okay. So one of the ways to do that is often there are affinity groups, there are resource groups, there are a lot of different types of organizations that exist in a lot of different careers. Most of them, many of them have best practices, they have information. So doing research is one of the things we can do much more. There's so many different ways that we can help people grow. And so by getting research, employee opinion survey, seeing what the needs are, and quite frankly, ask. Ask what you need. What will help you be more productive here? What are the kind of supports that you would like to have? What are the things we can do more of? And be willing to say the things that we can do and the things that we can't do. But it's not just trying to do things, it's listening to see what people are thinking and needing and then providing those solutions.
How does a business assess their current status of equity, inclusion, and diversity? And taking into account now, having heard you speak, how we're growing our employees, how we're making sure that there's room for them to move up and learn.
So many different organizations will do either an organizational assessment, a cultural assessment, a survey. And it's usually several components of it. One is taking a look at your current information and data, what's taking place there. The second is qualitative surveys that have you get a sense of how people are feeling and the why behind it. And then certainly quantitative data and surveys. And you take all of that information in an aggregate, and it begins to tell a story. And that story helps you to begin to see where you have strengths, where you have challenges. And then based on that, you start having to identify what we like to call the critical few things you can work on. One of the things we see a lot of organizations do is they'll find that they have several opportunities and they try to do them all at once. And what we talk about is getting more focused. And it's better to do one or two things exceptionally well first and then continue the process. It's a journey.
Do you have any thoughts on making diversity, equity, inclusion goals as part of performance reviews? Like baking it into how you gauge their performance?
Hiring managers, supervisors.
Yes, 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 and yes. Everything in corporate America, for the most part, is measured. If your thesis is, which ours is, that diversity, equity, inclusion is good for the business, then it would make all the sense in the world to me that you'd have performance metrics that would show progress and or not. So accountability is important, compensation is important, and any other types of measures we think are incredibly important, incentives, etc.
None of these things sound difficult. They seem pretty common, types of things we do in the workplace. So what's stopping so many businesses from starting a diversity, I shouldn't even say diversity program because it needs to be part of your culture.
Yes. I think there are a couple things. One, I believe that, so let me just frame real quickly what we found that are the best practices, what they have in place, and then I'll share with you. 5 things that best practice organizations have on this work. The first is a compelling purpose. They've really linked D, E, and I to their bottom line. They've also linked it to how they will motivate their employees and their customers. People don't do that. The second is they have to have strategic measurable actions. They have to have things that they can measure and act against. They don't do that. Those are 2, I think, of the key things. But leadership is, I think, the biggest one. And it's the courage to lead. Oftentimes, this is not an easy subject. And so leaders who are willing to really lead forward until they can get the rest of the organization on board, I think is one of the key things. So leadership is, to me, the number 1.
What are some mistakes that you've seen that now make a good learning experience of what not to do?
Whew. Okay, how long we got? So I'm gonna give you one that I think is real common. We got a diversity issue, a challenge. Let me find the one black person in the organization and make them the diversity person. And now, Mr. or Mrs. Diversity Person, all the issues on diversity have now come to you. Oh, by the way, no resources, no support. By the way, nobody else is going to do anything else. However, you have more melanin than anyone, so you have been hired. I think, I'm laughing about that, but the reality is oftentimes people aren't seeing diversity, equity, and inclusion as everybody's responsibility, and they often will pigeonhole it into that. The second thing is, I think that people don't truly understand what it takes, and they often start doing, I call them random acts of kindness versus strategic decisions. So they go for the easy things, like today we're gonna have ethnic food Sunday. And all of a sudden, that's gonna really make a big difference. Well, love the meal, but it's really not gonna make a difference in the culture. But I love to eat, as you can see, so I'm not gonna turn that one down. But I think this is hard work. The last one is, I have seen some of the smartest companies in the world who are strategic in every way. And you say the word diversity, and they can't think anymore. Folks, my point is this. Like any other business decision, you attack it in the same way. And these companies can create all kinds of things. They can certainly work on these initiatives. So it's really not thinking about this outside like it's some mystery. It's how do we accomplish everything else we have done forever? And build it with that kind of rigor and process, not make it something outside.
Building on that and something you said earlier about not trying to do everything all at once, what is that one small thing that employers or employees, supervisors can do when they leave here tomorrow morning?
For me, I would start with trust. All the studies show that first of all, you can't be a diverse and inclusive organization unless you have a high trust. It just doesn't work well. You have to have that. So I would say, what are the things we can do to understand how we can build more trust in our organization? So what things do we have in play that we can do that? I say start with trust. Whether that's creating conversations and dialogues and things of that nature, but I think it's really about building trust. That's what I would say is the first thing that all of us could do. What I would say everybody can do here today, though, is start thinking about being intrinsically inclusive, being the role model yourself, finding a relationship with somebody that's not like yourself, do that right here. Do it right now. I mean, look around. We have to take opportunities. Okay, I see you. Let's stay connected. If that was the one thing I would do, I would say do that. Find a relationship with somebody that's different than you and get engaged. Whether that's at work, in the community, or somewhere else. And then I think everything else will start to build from that.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to switch gears to a video that I had watched of you a while back. And you were talking about Pew Research. And you said that there were 3 times in history in which race was a top priority. The Civil Rights Movement, Rodney King, and then most recently George Floyd. But then you broke my heart and said we're already losing momentum. So why? I mean, what do we do to keep the momentum this time?
And you've got some time. So.
Okay, so when the murder of Mr. Floyd happened, one of the first questions that went through my head, honestly, like I'm sure everyone here, was heartbreak, etc. But I got to tell you, it wasn't news. It just wasn't news. It's been happening for 400 years in one form or another. So that's number one. In fact, I talked to a friend of mine who we're in the same age group, and we started to say, so what's different? I personally think the fact that we were all in the pandemic, that we were all stressed and focused, and the horrendous nature that was captured for such a period of time is what caught our attention. But Emmett Till, here's my point. There have been inflection points for 400 years. The Pew Research almost was like an electrocardiogram. It spiked high in the 60s. Then it went down. Then it spiked. Can we all just get along? And then it went down. And then it spiked with Mr. Floyd. And the research says it's already starting to go down. My first question was, is this going to be a moment or a movement? And I believe unless we start to internalize some of the new behaviors that we all need to exhibit, then unfortunately, and it breaks my heart, that my grandsons, my sons, your grandsons and granddaughters can all continue to see this. It is the reason why I come back to, we have to have this conversation on race. We have to be able to really have a real dialogue. And unlike, and maybe we can learn from other places, we also are going to need some reconciliation in terms of our spirits and our feelings and our hearts. But unless we can start having those tough conversations, my fear is that we'll continue to see until there's the next spike. I think it's up to us, but that's my personal fear.
So last question then, based on that, what are your marching orders to all of us? And I know it's not one simple thing, and you've talked about a lot of it, but close us out with what you need us to do when we leave here tonight.
When I was first going to do this presentation, and I want to first, and again, thank you, Quint, for this amazing opportunity. As I said before when we started, I am humbled and most appreciative. I'm really humbled to Pensacola for allowing me to have this conversation. And I'm trusting that you all will be the model to kind of lead the way. This is kind of our first stop. I don't have a one thing to do. What I'd ask you to do is to think about, seriously, if there was one or two things that I shared that resonate with you, that you will not just talk about it, you'll be about it. And the collective energy of this group here, I believe, could start a transformation. But the one thing I don't have, but what I do believe, if we act together on all these things that we talked about, we can make a big difference. And that would be my hope. Thank you. Thank you. The power of the pause.
We told you it was going to be fantastic.
Thank you,
and I
brother.
can't imagine a better speaker to come in to have our first in-person where we can see each other, build trust, and build relationships than having Vincent here with us tonight.
Could I do one other thing?
Absolutely.
Would you mind standing, sir? Thank you. I'm looking at a Purple Heart. I'm looking at a Purple Heart. Give him a stand up, folks. I mean, this man right here, I don't know who you are, but I'm looking at a Purple Heart. I'm looking at a Purple Heart. This is the country that we live in. Thank you, sir. We love you.
Thank all of you so much for being here tonight. That's the perfect close. I want to remind everybody that
Thank you, sir.
have those
We need to be
surveys.
talking
Please
to a
take
bunch of
time to fill it
bikers.
out. Those help us
Absolutely.
for future speakers.
Thank you,
And
sir.
also
Take that coat
a
off. You're
reminder that
sweating.
June
I know. Thank you, sir.
28th is when we have the Lotus campaign that will be speaking about additional ways that we can help tackle the homeless issue that we have here in Pensacola. Thank you all so much. Drive safely.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I can't stand it. Explain the shoes.
Okay.
I'm Dan.
Okay, Dave. Okay, so here's the shoes.
Okay.
When I used to sell peanuts at Old Crosley Field,
Okay.
what shoe was in style?
Chuck Yeager?
Chuck Taylor. Chuck Taylors, right?
Yeah.
So
Chuck, not a Chuck.
I wear my Chuck Taylors to remind me where I've been,
Okay.
which are my shoes. And then I typically wear a hat with the Cincinnati Reds because at one point in time, I became a minority owner in the Reds.
Oh, wow.
And that reminds me of where I can go. And I say only in this country can you go from Converse to be
love it.
a part of the American dream.
love
Second reason, people say, why do you have those on?
No, I love them.
And that's, so I always have my Chucks on.
Okay.
And third, I'm old and they're comfortable.
Yeah. Do you know Jim Verdon?
No, I don't.
He's Cincinnati. He was over the Rhine. He's the Verdon Clock up in Cincinnati,
Okay.
Ohio. I got to meet him about 5 years ago and became very, very good friends. He passed away just a couple of years ago. But he literally took that, from what I understand, was the depressed.
Oh, let me tell you,
place
over the Rhine is, have you ever been there?
Yeah, Jim's the guy that was responsible
Oh my
for the
God,
revitalization.
okay, oh my God, it's like,
He bought the old Catholic school.
yeah, I know who you're talking about
Verdon
now.
Clock.
Yes.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Oh my God, that place
And the
is
feeding
amazing.
place?
Yes.
He told me all about that.
Yes.
An abandoned shoe factory.
Yes.
He turned it into they have what it's called, into the
Last Fridays.
He started all that. And I miss him.
Yeah, he left a great legacy there. Yeah.
I love the shoes. I like the story even better.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to see you tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
Makes sense, right? But they build on each other. And
You don't need slides.
Okay, brother. Got you. Thank you.
I'm hovering around taking photos.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
We'll see you in the morning. I'll be able to look.
So I have a question. I just got my master's in applied behavior analysis. I'm taking some time off because I'm military. I'm just getting out, trying to raise myself a little bit, you know.
Okay.
And it was funny though. I started the degree thinking I was going to go into applied behavior analysis, dealing with all. And that still kind of throughout my degree, I discovered ABM. And towards the last half of my degree, was when everything with George Floyd happened, and I discovered it's looking into implicit bias and how we can change organizations and behaviors and all that kind of stuff, and how those two fields really work together. I didn't even know that diversity, DEI was its own field.
Yes.
So, like, my question is kind of what I really want to do. Honestly, it's kind of what they said your job was, but be a consultant.
Right.
But, like, how do we do that?
Well, there are several consultancies that are out there. If you give me your card, I can maybe.
I don't.
Or write down.
Yeah. Right now, I'm not working. I'm also still in reserve, so I have 3 years till I retire.
Okay. Yeah, but write down that information for me, and I'll send you a couple of sources to consider.
And that's really I want to start figuring out what I can do.
Okay. Yep.
Because I don't want to do just my behavior analysis therapy. I want to do more like dive into the PM.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we need some folks doing it. See what's happening? That Mississippi connection is tough. Yes.
I really need to push the emails. I will eventually.
My children both graduated high school.
Great. Okay. Give me a couple of days. Okay. Great. I will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you appreciate it. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And the weather was very good. And I walked.
I was out on the step and I came back. And I know if I could share David Saunders, I'm new to Pensacola somewhat. I spent a couple of decades in Mississippi, some recruiting there. I coached collegiately for 3.5, and I'm dying to, I'm guessing, an offense. Even though your picture, you look like a defensive guy, but something's telling me you were a quarterback or a center or guys that, those guys direct traffic. They're decision makers. So I'm dying to know.
Well, believe it or not, I was a tight end and a free safety.
Oh, yeah, both of those guys are directing traffic.
Yep.
So thank you for that. My instinct.
Absolutely.
But and it's probably already in there, but you get to that point and everyone, what can I do? What can I do? Since 1982, when I left Andalusia City Schools, my first college position, south of the Mason-Dixon, from Chatham, Virginia, to Houston, to Miami, Nashville. I've been in all those school districts. That's our last common ground.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, and I do it daily, and our superintendent was here, but if each one of us just kept relentlessly inviting, get involved with your school, get involved. I believe what would happen, and I see you, like me now, I recruited all of those areas, and recently when I came back here, because I dealt with freshman classes that had difficulty reading, writing an introduction. I taught reading in English, and I was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm in these schools, you know, but
right.
So to get people back involved with the school.
Yeah.
And I know I'm taking you time, but it's what you were describing, these things that we learned in athletics, is we toiled together.
Oh yeah.
And that bond. And I see it. I'm in these meetings. I'm now at UWF in the College of Business. And we have these thoughts and ideas, and they're wonderful. And then as soon as we talk, or maybe have that one luncheon, and then poof, it's gone.
Right.
we've got to toil.
Yeah.
And I think the schools is
Yeah.
a chance to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you.
No, thank you.
And
I hope that this presentation added some things for you.
It did, and if you can add, and the only thing I know to do is do it like I coach, just rep.
There you go.
There you go. That's
There you go. That's it.
man.
That's a
the fundamentals.
yeah.
I don't know, I'm sure Morton, I know you know families, but dude's as gifted as a player as you'll ever see. But that man